Today I have a wrecked iPhone 11 Pro Max. Falling off the top of a vehicle at high speed has not been kind to this one. The back glass seems to have taken the most damage, with a few pieces missing or hanging on by a thread of adhesive. The front is not much better and not working well. To be honest, it could have been a lot worse if it had gotten run over. Thankfully, we have a replacement screen and a replacement frame. It's got some small parts pre-installed as well as the flash, power, and volume buttons. There's no logo on the back because Apple says that's counterfeiting, even if it's pulled from an OEM part. At least it looks pretty good debranded. Alright, I'm going to get right into it. 2 penalobes at the bottom hold what's left of the screen on. I'm going to be honest, I'm not too excited about this one. iPhone frame swaps are some of the most in-depth repairs, not due to complexity, but because of the sheer amount of screws that need to be removed and reinstalled. So strap in, this is going to be a pretty long video. I'm going to be as detailed as possible, within reason. It's a lot to keep up with. A metal pry tool can now wedge between the display and the frame. Thankfully the frame isn't bent like that one that fell in the milk. I'll carefully split the adhesive holding it together. I guess I don't have to be super gentle with the screen since it's pretty useless now anyway. It's putting up a good fight though. From this view, the screen opens like a calendar. First target is the battery connector under that tiny shield in the center. 2 standard sized tri-wings hold it firmly to the double layered logic boards, then the shield can be pulled away. Disconnecting the battery is pretty important, but you're in for a surprise because this one has 2 battery connectors. The other one is hidden in the charging port. There are 6 tri-wings securing a shield over the main ribbon connectors to the board. These are all the same size as the battery shield. Make sure the screen isn't open further than about 45 degrees. Avoiding board damage is a good thing. Under the large shield are several flex connectors, but for now only the 3 ribbons going to the screen are important. I'll get those disconnected like little Legos. Then the display can be pulled away safely. 2 of those ribbons go to the screen and 1 to the ear speaker assembly at the top. The camera shield has 2 tri-wings. The first is in the very top of the frame, the second is in the center of the camera shield itself, but it isn't able to come out just yet. Everything in this phone is very securely attached. There are 2 more tri-wings holding a retaining bracket down. This shield keeps the camera bracket in place and keeps the ribbon connectors from touching the battery. Next, the camera shield can be lifted up and out. It has a retaining clip that hooks under the frame, so it needs to be pulled away from that side. Progress. Now we need to remove another retaining bracket over the charging port ribbon. Apple seems to have some real concerns about their devices falling apart internally. There's absolutely no need for this many screws. I need to loosen the battery to get it ready for removal. Thanks to these fantastic pull tabs, battery removal should be easy. I mean, when they don't tear. If they do, heat and alcohol seem to be the best solution. It's a good idea not to bend battery cells with tweezers or metal tools. And the bottom one's ripped, of course. I'll use alcohol in the heat mat of shame. Moving on to the charging port, there are countless screws to remove. I'm just going to stop counting at this point. Most are tri-wings, but a few are Phillips heads just to mix it up. Wouldn't be an iPhone without a handful of traps. Components like the Taptic engine have flex connectors going to this weird centralized daughter board on the charging port. Disconnecting the battery again is pretty important. It can be removed easily after the main shield is removed. At least most of the components in here are completely modular and can be disconnected and swapped out pretty quickly. With the cute little microphone shield removed, we finally encounter the standoffs. If you don't have a standoff driver, a flathead works just as well. Keeping a good screw map here is super important because there are a ton of screws. Remembering the order in which they came out is also critical to reassembling it properly. It'll help prevent you from making extra steps and having to undo misplaced screws. Because this is a frame swap, it's a good rule of thumb just to remove everything. If I sat here and described every screw I removed, the video would be way too long, so you should definitely pause it as needed. This script is already several pages deep. Thought it was done? Nope. 2 tri-wings are threaded in on the inner right of the frame. They keep the ribbon connector firmly attached to the housing for reasons, I guess? Now it's free to remove, though a hefty amount of adhesive is used, so pulling it very carefully is your best bet. Here's my charging port screw map. It's a real doozy with those standoffs. And here we are so far. It's a mess. Still watching? Ribbons are on top of ribbons in this crazy Lego city. They need to be gently popped open. The camera module can be pried from the top and pulled out of the frame. Keep the lenses clean. With a few more connectors popped on the left side, the selfie camera and sensor board can be lifted out of the way. They are more or less free floating in the frame at this point. 3 standoff screws hold the logic board in place. You can tell they're grounding screws also by the gold rings on the PCB where they thread in. Making sure your SIM tray is ejected, the logic board can be pulled out. Keep this little guy safe. It's your whole phone. I'm going to take a second here and just marvel at this. This is your entire iPhone right here. 2 boards sandwiched together with solder. A lot of flex connections on one side and pretty blank underneath. I'm sure it won't be long and these will be even smaller. Hooray for antenna arrays! This whole ribbon connector gets pretty wild and is arguably harder to take out than the charging port. Right off the bat, there are 3 tri-wings. 2 of those are securing a little L-shaped shield. This retaining screw has a springy grounding contact. Take care not to lose it when you remove the screw. There is a puzzling pair of Phillips head on the inner left top of the frame and a tri-wing in the center. You can start poking and prodding the ribbon up from the adhesive, but don't get overly excited, we're far from done. There are 3 short tri-wing screws securing it to the right side of the housing next to the camera. Finally, the tedious process of loosening these antenna stickers off begins. A drop of alcohol or heat will definitely help this process. Threading it out from under another ribbon is also really tricky. I don't want to tear either of them. This phone is fully gutted, and I'm hoping your screw map looks better than mine. But as long as you can read your map, it's perfectly fine. I'll swap the broken housing for the brand new one that has the power and volume pre-installed. Going in reverse order, threading the antenna array under this ribbon by the lenses. This is truly the most frustrating part of the repair. Trying to line it up, getting it under the ribbon and not snagging anything or ripping anything, and getting it to stay down in place while you're about to screw is just really tedious. I'm going to spin those 3 tri-wings back into the frame next to the camera. These sideways screws aren't necessarily difficult to reinstall, but they're a little tricky when you have a camera mounted in front of you and you're trying to work around a tripod, so your mileage will probably vary and be better than mine. I'm going to line up the tri-wing and grounding spring over the hole and tighten it down together, keeping the spring pointing to the top. I'll then replace the peculiar pair of the tri-wing and Phillips head screws to the top of the housing. You get the idea. I'm going to skip the next step. Dropping the logic board in, we've got those 3 standoff screws to tighten in. Make sure your hand doesn't slip if using a flathead. Board work costs extra. Because the ribbon connectors are designed in such a way that ribbons will be laying over top of ribbons, it's a good idea to reconnect everything that we have so far before we start laying in more. At this point, I'll lay the main camera back down into its housing here and reconnect those flex connectors. I'm going to time-lapse the reinstallation of the charging port. This is the step where it's not only important to have a screw map, but know the order in which they were removed. The standoffs need to be installed before trying to screw any shields down. Thanks to some magic that we call video editing, it's going to look like I got this installed in the first try with no issues, absolutely perfectly, and I definitely didn't install things out of order. So, yeah. The 2-cell L-shaped battery can be laid into the housing with some fresh adhesive. Next up is the front-facing camera and friends. Feel free to reconnect flexes along the way, just not the battery yet. The stiff charging port ribbon can be reconnected. It kind of looks like a mitten with that little thumb connector. Cute. A thin bracket keeps the ribbon held down with those 3 short tri-wings we removed earlier. You kept a screw map, right? The camera shield along with its retainer can be screwed back in place. Back at the charging port, almost home free at this point, right? There's a square shield that needs to be screwed back down after all the Legos are built. Let's cut to what could be an entirely separate repair, the screen. That ear speaker assembly needs to come out. It has 1 teeny tri-wing and 2 Phillips screws securing it to the shattered display. Using the iCopy tool from Chanli, I'll read and record the programming for the original screen, then connect the replacement display and write that to it. This allows the phone to retain true tone and adjust colors according to your environment. Installing the ear speaker is easier than removing it. Just line everything up and replace the tri-wing and 2 Phillips that held it in place. Time for a test. Before we go into full reassembly, I'll connect all 3 of the ribbons coming out from the display, making sure everything else is already plugged in. Finally connecting the battery and powering the device on. The screen is working well. I'll fully test it before moving on to the next part. Lining up some water and dust resistant adhesive will give this repair a near factory finish. With some practice, you can get this down pretty quick. It's finally time for the full reassembly. Everything connected. The main shield needs to be tightened to the logic board, along with that tiny little battery shield. I realize I've sped up a lot of this repair, but to be honest, there's only so much talking content that I can fit into turning screws. Then it can all be closed up, pressing the display tightly to the housing so the adhesive makes a good bond. 2 pentalobes till we are home free. It's been fun. Kind of. Thanks for sticking around this long if you did. I hope this video was helpful. At some point in the future I might make one that's even longer if people are interested. And thanks for watching. Leave some comments and questions below. Feel free to subscribe if you're interested in more content like this. And I'll see you next time.